Hey YouTube, it's Taki with Taki Tech. Okay, so we are on episode 17 here. We're going to start talking about the complexities of this particular project. We're going to be working on Model 6. As I said, we skipped Model 5. I'm going to start working where we have two meeting times, basically. And I'm going to just want to take you right to the spreadsheet right away. So basically, there's a lot of things when I started modeling out that I needed to figure out in order to have the correct times in the array. First thing, basically, it's not, I was able to figure out the problems when I modeled it out rather easily. We went, basically, let me go to the model actually. So here we are on Model 6. Basically, everything is fine up to here. And then right here on task code 45 is when we really are at 11 a.m. As you can see here, we get 11 a.m. Here's where our meeting is. And then we have our meeting for an hour, and then we need to switch back into task code 45. And then we have a break. So this is actually modeled in considering all three elements here. Not only the task codes, not only the meetings, but also the breaks. But for this particular phase of the project, all we're going to focus on is and I decided the best thing to do was put the meetings, because they are tasks, they're just scheduled tasks within the rest of the tasks. So basically what we end up here at the very end of all this is an array that looks like this. And this is how the array looks before we put the scheduled tasks in, or the meetings. This is how it looks after we put the scheduled tasks in with the meetings. So you can see here we have our 98 meeting, here's our 99 meeting. And basically what ends up happening is, like, task code 45 gets split here, and then it might get split later on when we have a break, but let's just focus on the meetings. So basically we need to say, okay, so we have 168 minutes for each one of the tasks 41 and 45. If you take a look at it, they're both at 35%. But basically, I'm going to take 102 minutes. I have 102 minutes in task 45 before I get to the meeting at 11. And then I do my then I do my 60 minutes for the meeting, 1 hour meeting, my task code 98. Then what's the remainder of 102 minus 168, or because I had 168 initially and 45 is 66, so then I go back into task code 45 and I work for another 66 minutes. The way I kind of figure out on how we're going to keep track, how we're going to count down when these meetings occur, is I took a look at the difference of time between the start time and the first meeting. So here, we look here, our start time unfortunately is not, let me go back to the original model, 6 a.m. The first meeting's at 11 a.m., so there's 5 hours. When I started modeling it, I realized that there was a problem and that I needed to also take in consideration that first break, 30-minute break. So what you end up with is 4.5 hours, which is 270 minutes. And then the next break, when you start counting right away from 11 a.m., this is what I found in the modeling too, you start counting right away from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., you have 3 hours, so that's 180 minutes, but there's a break at 1 of 12 minutes. So then I get my 168. So let me make this a little bit bigger here. We gotta go to view, let's do web layout. And let's increase the font. Here we go. Sorry guys. So this is how our meeting array should look. I have a multi-dimensional array. It's going to have 1 row, 3 columns. And basically, well, it's going to have more than 1 row, but basically it's going to have 3 columns. We have our meeting to the time to meeting, from the start to the meeting minus the break, so we have 270, length of meeting, the meeting's activity code. And then from there, we have the next meeting, is there's 3 hours, but there was a break in there, so of 12 minutes, so we get 168, and it's going to be 30 minutes. We have a 99 activity code. So I have a private function here. It's going to return a value of the meetings. It's going to give me this 270 basically. I declared 4 variables, and I start off right away. And I'll probably, once I go back and refactor this a little bit, I probably will rearrange. I like to, when I list my variables, I like to list them in the order that they're happening, especially because sometimes you declare it on the fly as you're working on something and it turns out you don't really need it. That way I'm able to keep an audit or keep track of the variables I need and the variables I don't need. We got 4 variables here. We have row count as an integer. Basically, it's just a row counter. We have the total minutes. Most likely that is going to be what I'm calculating, or I'm trying to calculate some type of minutes here. I have meeting time as a date, so that's probably the time the meeting starts. And then I have pre-meeting minutes as an integer. I'm not really sure what that is at this point. Hopefully we'll be able to flesh it out, and then we will be able to flesh it out in the code, or it was in the code. Otherwise, it's just something that I really didn't need. So here we get our meetings time. So we take a look at the sheet. We go to our meeting row, which is something that's passed in. I'm sorry, I completely forgot to talk about what we're passing into the function. So we're passing in something, meeting row, as an integer, and then we're returning the minutes, the number of minutes, as an integer. So this is being called actually from the next subroutine that we're going to talk about in just a second. So let's say meeting row is, so let's take a look at the spreadsheet here. Let me get to the actual. So meeting row would be 17, because we can see our first meetings on line 17 or row 17 on the spreadsheet. So we say meeting row 17 value. So we basically are looking at column B. Column B is, of course, 11 a.m. So I was right when I guessed that. And then our row count. Actually, let me do this real quick. Then our row count is equal to 10. So we start with row 10. So I believe we're looking at the breaks. No? I'm wondering. I think we're going backwards. Let's take a look here. Let's go back to the code. So no, we're not. Do until row count equals 10. Row count equals 6 here. I'm sorry, guys. It must be late at night. I must be tired. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through this do until loop 4 times. All right. So we're still at row count here. So this is 6B, and we're looking at the value in 6B and seeing if it is less than the meeting time that we originally scheduled. So is this less than 11 o'clock? So we start with 10. Is it less than 11 o'clock? Yes. So then we will go back here. So if it's this, then we're going to, I have some other conditionals here. And okay, I kind of remember when I wrote this here. So there was some complexities. Sometimes I needed to know when I needed to drop in and when I didn't need to. So I'm saying that I just want the value one time. So what I'm saying here is that, okay, so let me keep track of it. So the meeting time is 11 o'clock. This time is 10. So what I'm saying is 10 has to equal greater than the last value. So it would be 0 in this case because we're looking at a place where there is no value. And it cannot be empty, because if we said it was less than, it's possible that will come out as, the empty ones will come out as less than. And then basically I'm just keeping a running total here, and this is where I'm at, guys. Sorry, This is getting a little convoluted here. Then total minutes equal, and you could just see the complexity of this project. Then total minutes equals total minutes plus, we're going to look at C here. So if we go back here, we're looking at 30. And we're going to increment it again and go back through it again until we get to 10. So that is get total breaks before meeting. And I'll try to run through it one time when we go through the code here. And then basically we return the function when we get through the do loop. And maybe because I called it out of turn here, I didn't do this in order here. We just didn't jump to it. Maybe this will make a little bit more sense after we go through this. So here's this loading the meeting times. So basically this is the function that we're going to use to load this up here to get this into an array. And this function right here that we just went through, that I did a horrible job explaining, basically just gets us this amount right here. That's all we're looking for in this function, the minutes before the meeting. Okay, so let's go back down to load meeting times. Got again 4 integers here, and I'll refactor that at some point if I didn't use all those variables. We have last row. This is used to get the start time from the last scheduled meeting, defaulted to 1. So it starts off with 1. It might be something different later on. Row count, we're starting at 14. 14 is right here, so that's good. That makes sense. Task count equals count tasks, and now I'm throwing in B. So now I'm telling it to look at column B here. And I was thinking also, I could probably use this at some point when we count the breaks, if we need to count the breaks, by throwing the row in to tell it where to start. So I could say, start with 6 or start with 14. But usually if you go back and look at the last video, we always, when we in this function count task, we always start with row 14. But this time we're looking at column B, which is here. So we're just going to come up with 2. So we get 2 there. And this is a note I put in there now. So basically I'm redimming meeting times, multi-dimensional array. We're going to say it starts off with 2 rows. So it'll be 1, 2. And by the way, I subtracted 1 here because we're on base 0. I don't change it to base 1. I leave it at base 0 for our arrays. And like I explained before, I do that because, and we could talk about this in another video, but VBA it won't be going away. But we might see more people using Python inside of Excel in the future. And Python, I'm not too familiar with it, but they may have the ability to change it to base 1, and maybe there is an ability in all the programming languages, but I've never run across the ability to change an array from base 0 to base 1 where it's built in. So all the other programming languages I've worked with, and this is getting roundabout here to the reason, are base 0. And I don't want to start playing around with that and I have to change the way I think if I start writing code in a different language. All right, so I'm staying base 0, so that's why we took the task count. This would be 1 and 2, giving us 2 rows, 3 columns. And then I zero out meeting, or I finally initialize meeting number equals to 0. All right, do until row count equals 21. So this is basically just saying row count is now 14. We're going to go through everything. We're going to go through every single cell here. If there's no value, then we're not doing anything. But if there is a value, then we're going to take that very first row and in that very first column, and we're going to call that get time period subroutine that we just did, and we're going to get that, and we're going to subtract that get total breaks before meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. So get time period, Yeah, it's getting late. So this will probably be the only video I'm able to record today. So get time period is a different function that we've done before. Basically, it'll just give it, we throw in 4 cells in it. We get basically the first 2 are the row. It's not even 4 cells. So we pass in the row and the column for the first cell and the row and the column for the second cell, and both of them should have times in them. So basically we're saying, I know for sure this is saying 1 and 2. So basically we're looking at that 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's giving us our 3 hours, and then we're going to subtract the get total breaks before meeting, which is a separate thing we just went through. And that will give us 30 minutes. And the last row equals row count. So we're just keeping track of our last row here. And then we're going to fill in that second column by looking at that percentage when we go here. And this will give us an hour, and this will give us 30 minutes for that second column. All right, so, and the very last thing, we're going to look at column D, which it gives us the task period number. Okay. And then we keep on looping through. We change our meeting number so we can change. This is basically keeping track of what row we're on in the array. And this is keeping track of what row we're looking at on the spreadsheet. And I just want to see where last row comes into play again. This last row piece of code here, maybe it'll make sense when we run through the code, but I'm thinking that's something that I had in there that I was thinking about that never got used. So I'm just gonna get rid of this. I hope that helps you guys kind of, when I go through the code, kind of see it a little bit better. I'm gonna hit stop here. And we're going to, actually I'm going to go back to the code here. And I'm going to run this load meeting times. I'm just going to make sure this is on, yep, okay, so this is on the real spreadsheet that we need to look at. And let me just put a stop here. Oh, you know what, I could just hit F8. So our last row equals 1, row count equals 14. Just to run through it again, task count. So we're going to drop down here. We're throwing in column B, count the tasks. So we already have column letter as string here. We're going to return an integer that counts the tasks, and we passed in the B. And see, this is a whole lot easier for me to explain because I could actually look at it. So we start off with row count equals 14, task count equals 0, do until row count. So we're going to look at all the rows here, and we're going to count all of the tasks. But in this particular case, we're only looking at scheduled tasks because we passed in column B. All right, so we finally got our first one here, and if we look at the row count, it is 17. We go back here to the spreadsheet, it is 11 o'clock is at 17, so that is working perfectly. And here we go, and we got our second one, and this should be equals 2. All right, and so we got our one here, like I said before. We're going to redim meeting times, which is declared way at the top here. And I made it a private variable, meaning that it's available to all the subroutines within this module, but it's not available outside of the module. And it's just as a one-dimensional array up here just by itself, and then I'm going to redim it into the 2-dimensional array. All right, so here we go. Now, if you go down here into the watch, you can see we have this is how it looks when it gets to be 3 dimensions, or 2 dimensions with basically 3 columns. All right, so meeting number equals 0. I'm thinking that's a legacy, and we're going to basically go through the whole thing, and we should probably, if it's not equal to nothing, and nothing happens. And wait till we have some action here, and there we go. So we're still at meeting 0, 0. We're going to get our time period. Basically, we're passing in those rows. So I'm looking at 1, 2, and 17, 2. Oh, this is where last row comes into play. Okay, so I could change this 1 so that the next time that it loops through, it's going to say 17, 2. All right. And if you can tell, there was at some point I made a real crucial design plan. And now let me get to the spreadsheet in just a second here. I'm sorry, we dropped right into get total breaks before meeting. There was no, I just kept hitting F8 here. So we got our meeting time, like I said before, 11 a.m. So we're kind of looking at this function here, and then I'm going to get back to something in just a second. Row count equals 6. We're going to do it until row count equals 11. Very long, very ugly if statement. Something I'm probably going to refactor at some point. And you guys know what I mean. I'll throw that into a real simple subroutine to return a Boolean true or false so that it looks a lot better. And we're just going to keep going through there until we actually hit our total minutes. Oh, we must have already hit it. Okay. I'm off today, guys. Sorry. All right. So we're going to return, hit F9 instead of F8. So there we go. We returned our 30 minutes. So this should be 270. We look down here. Here's your 270. And then what I was going to say before we accidentally fell in there, as real important design element of design that I did here was I decided to put all of the break times, the time in, and the task times in column B or column 2. So that way it's going to be very easy for me to reference them. I know where I need to go every single time it's in column 2. And we're going to revisit that again when we start printing the times. All right, so back here again. So last row. So this is saying 17. It was a great segue actually. So the next time I go through this, we'll be looking at 17, 2. So we'll be looking at the difference between 17, 2, right here, 11 a.m. and probably 2 p.m. It will be 2 p.m. as a matter of fact. Here we're going to get our percentage in, and that's 60 minutes. Here we're going to get our 98 in. If you look down here, if you can get this bigger on your screen, that's 98. All right, so there's our first part. And if we go, oh, I closed out the Word document. So we'll go. I knew I shouldn't have did that when I did that. Okay, here we go. And here we go back into count total minutes. Let me see if I could actually. All right, so we got our 12 minutes. We looked at. So this should be, let me close this one. Let's make this bigger. So we got our 168. And this should be 30 minutes. And there's our 99. And that's it. So there's our meeting times. They're loaded. Sorry for the long, convoluted explanation. Hopefully next time it will get a little bit better as we start looking at, okay, so we got 270 minutes. Let me get back to the model here. And I think that's part of the problem here is I'm bouncing between so many different screens here. It's getting confusing for me as well. I can't even imagine for you guys. So we basically say, okay, we got 168. Is 300 more than 168? Yeah, okay. So then we subtract the 168 from the 300. Say what's left. All right. I'm sorry, is 168, so we subtract that from the 270, what's left? 102. All right, so we'll throw that 102 back into 45. We'll drop our meeting time in now because we are at our 11 o'clock. And then we'll start to count again and we'll say, okay, so we got 66 left here. So we'll drop the 45. We'll subtract that from the 168 here, and then we'll just keep on going down here. I'll show you guys the code I wrote for that to kind of get this whole array here. Then once we get this whole array, then we compare that. We go way back to our break time array, and then we start comparing the two there. almost in a similar fashion. Only difference is, instead of loading the times into a new array or creating a new array, we will start printing them out. And most of them will be in column. We'll print it in column F, and then it's a real simple modification in column G. The only difference is when you have a break, we need to get these break times. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for watching. If you stayed tuned this long, if you were able to keep up with it, there is going to be a change that you would have already noticed by now. I will be publishing videos every other day as opposed to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So there will be at least one either on Saturday or Sunday. If there isn't a new video for you today, there will be one for you tomorrow. I really appreciate you watching, and till next time, take it easy.